Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to run through how to clean your Baitcaster reels and make them last a lot longer. In today's video, we're going to break down this Baitcaster. We're going to put oil in it, we're going to put grease in it, we're going to clean out all the excess dirt, and it's going to be basically good as new and ready for the new upcoming fishing season. By cleaning these every winter, you're going to be able to get the full potential out of your reels. You're going to have a lot farther casting distance. You're not going to have any hiccups when it comes to setting the hook or your drag or anything like that. Some of the tools I use for cleaning a reel, you'll see that I keep them all in a egg carton, and you'll see here in a little bit why I do this. But basically I just use some precision grease. I use some reel oil, also precision oil. This is just the Abu Garcia stuff. There's a bunch of different brands that are out there for oil and grease. You just want to make sure you put everything in the right spot. I actually have an old toothbrush that's used for scrubbing gears. And then I have a bunch of varieties of Phillips and flathead screwdrivers, as well as just a wrench, and this will be used to take that initial nut off for the handle. I also use Q-tips for cleaning little tight spots on the reel, and I use paper towels also for wiping it down. And you can kind of see here, I have my paper towel laid out. That's one thing I always do is I put a layer of paper towel down, and what that'll do is it'll allow me to see the work surface. So if I lose a little bitty spring on here, I can see it and it doesn't get lost in the background of the table or wherever I'm at. I always lay that down so I can see all my little parts and pieces as I remove them. Like we were talking about for the egg carton, that's what I'll do with the egg carton is I will, as I take pieces off of this reel, I'll actually put the pieces in each one of these little spots, and then I'll set it back here, and when I'm ready to reinstall it, I'll know where each one of those pieces are. And that keeps them from moving all over the table, rolling around, and losing parts and pieces. But now let's get into breaking down the actual reel and see what we can do to clean this thing up. First thing I'll do is I'll just kind of wipe down the whole reel, and this will get all the dirt and grime. And it's amazing how just a little bit of dirt and some of the moving parts and stuff will actually affect how well your reel works. But I'll just kind of wipe down this, and all these reels will be a little different, but for the most part they're very similar. But you'll see there's a Phillips head there. So what I'll do is I'll take my Phillips head, I'll remove that guy, put it in my egg carton so I don't lose it, and I'll take my pliers and take this nut off, and that basically will just hold that whole handle assembly on there. So I'll do that, and then this portion here I'll go in the egg cartons, and I like to put similar parts into similar areas. And I'll just pop that handle off, wipe the handle down a little bit where that nut was over it. As you can see, it kind of there was kind of some nasty stuff on there, so now we got that cleaned up. Pull these, there's a few little washers usually on here, so I'll pull those off, and I'll keep them in order so that I know which way they go back in order. And I'll wipe all these parts off as I go. Now what I'll do is I'll actually switch to this other side. And the way this one works is it has a switch here that I flip up, and this will pop off. A lot of them will have a little button here or a screw here, and it'll run across to the other side, and then you can just twist it off like that. This one here just has this switch, so I'll flip that up and I'll pull that out, and you'll see that's just the side plate there. It's got a bearing in there and some stuff that we'll deal with here in a little bit, but I'll wipe any excess grease or dirt out of there, set that aside also. And here's your spool, pops out of here. Sometimes if you got fishing line on it, sometimes it can be a little difficult. So what I'll do whenever I'm cleaning these, or whenever I pull my spool out, you want to make sure that you don't get any line on the outsides here or inside there. That way, when you go to put your spool back in, you don't have any issues. So one thing I'll do is I'll actually take a piece of tape, put it over there, and now it kind of holds down that tag end of your line. And when I go to put this spool back in after I'm done cleaning it, it won't snag up on that line. So that's a little trick that I've been doing for a while that really works out pretty good. But so now I got the spool out of here. I'm gonna wipe it down a little bit more. Just kind of wipe it as you go, and we'll take this spool tensioner off, which is just this this little knob here that it lets you adjust how fast the line comes out. Wipe that off, wipe in there a little bit, set that aside, and you'll see there's another little bearing. So all these are little bearings here, and all the bearings you'll want to put a drop of oil on them. You don't want to put grease on the bearings. Basically the bearings you'll put a drop of oil on, anti-reverse I'll put a drop of oil on, and the gears is where I'll put the grease at. Kind of remember that as a rule of thumb. I'll start removing this star, and that's basically what holds down your drag and attaches or tightens your drag, but I'll basically back that all the way out. And then you have these washers in here, and you want to make sure you remember which way they go in. You could take a picture of this too if it's easier to remember, but after you take a few of them apart, they're all remotely the same. So, and one thing to note with these washers is they kind of have, dropped one. They kind of have a like a curve to them. And what you want with these is you want them to have, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little bit of a space there. So like if this top one would be flipped over, they'd line up perfectly. But I have the bottom one curved in, the top one curved out, and then you have that little space and they slide right on like that. So that's something to remember whenever you go back to put those on. A couple more little bitty washers, and then you'll pull out this thing here that the bearings spin on. So we'll clean that guy up, set him aside. Now we have all the exterior parts removed from this reel, and we're going to take a screwdriver and start breaking into this main plate here. It depends on the reel. Sometimes you'll have a screw there, but for this reel, we have this screw here with this little grease door or whatever, and we'll have this one, and this one. So we got 3 or 4 screws that we need to take out, but like I said, it depends on the reel and where they come from. But you'll want to make sure when you remove these, and this is where I put them in different egg carton portions, that way I know where each one goes. So I removed all the screws holding this on. Side plate will just slide right off, and as you can see, all this yellow stuff in there, that's all old grease that is in there from the last time I cleaned the reel. I'll just go ahead and wipe all that out of there. You don't want to have an excess amount of grease in there because it'll collect dirt, and that'll just slow your reel down and it'll make everything not work as well. I'll also take a Q-tip to these little roller bearings. So if you can see in here, every one of these little guys in here have there's a bunch of little roller bearings, and what I'll do is I'll just wipe that out with a Q-tip, and it's actually not very dirty. Normally I get a bunch of dirt out of those. What I'll do whenever it's time to put this back on is I'll put a little drop in this bearing and put a little drop or two in this bearing, and that'll really help out my reel a bunch. Let's get back to the main portion of the reel. I'll set these springs aside. You don't want to lose those, and then I'll start removing the gear, and what I'll do is I'll basically just flip all these over and get all those drag washers out, and I'll keep them in the same order. Also, this is really important too, the way these teeth are moved. So what I'll do when I do this is I'll do this all at the same time, and I'll keep this washer together with it. That way I know it goes on the top side rather than the bottom side, because if I do that, then everything will be backwards. And your reel will not catch whenever you go to turn your handle. There's a few parts I kind of do at a time. That way I know which portions go with which. These are all drag washers. What I'll do is I'll just basically kind of dab them a little bit. I don't want to do anything too crazy and mess them up, but then I'll set that back in there, and then you'll have a metal piece. Same thing, just wipe it down, back in there, and these drag washers can actually be flipped. They're the same both ways. So this one you'll see in the middle actually has little tabs, and you'll line those up in this gear. You'll line those up so it matches right there. Do the last drag washer, do this last metal piece, throw that on there, throw that on there. Done with that portion. Come in here and I'll wipe the rest of this excess grease off. And actually I forgot to pull this other smaller gear out, but I'll pull that out. I'll wipe the grease off this guy, and this is another spot where I use a Q-tip just to get all that grease out of there and make sure that all the old grease is out and ready for new. And the gears a lot of times is where I'll use this toothbrush. I'll take this toothbrush, and it really helps you get into some of these gears and get that as clean as possible. Same way with this one. I'll kind of go around the edges, get that thing perfectly clean, try and get all this excess grease out of here, and we're almost ready to start applying the new grease and putting this reel back together. So now we're ready to start putting this thing back together. What I'll do is I'll put this little gear back in the this holder here, and I'll put it on these 2 pins. And make sure it's pushed all the way down, and you want to make sure all these parts are seated right. But Before I get ready to put the big main gear on, I'll put a little bit of grease on these two gears down here. And what I usually do is I just put a couple dabs there and I start spinning it. So I put some grease there and I start spinning it, and I actually kind of hold it to make sure that it goes down into the actual teeth of the gears and not like thrown all over the reel. So I got these two gears all greased up, and I'll go ahead and put this portion here. And this is the portion that actually, when you engage your reel, it will lock your gears into place and get it to going forward. But it's important on this to put it in the right spot. So like here, I don't have these grooves lined up. You can kind of see these grooves here, and you can see how this is keyed. If you have it the wrong way, it won't go down all the way. And line those grooves up, and there you're good to go. Put this washer on, and then I'll put the whole gear and drag assembly back on. Make sure it lines up with the teeth of this smaller gear, and it's not down all the way quite, so I'll kind of rotate it. Now you can see that it's level here. The main gear and the smaller gear are level. So now we know this is pushed down all the way, and we're ready to add grease to that. Same way with the other one. I'll just take my grease, I'll put some around this gear, and I'll start rotating it a little bit in each area. Rotate it. You want to make sure you get the grease around all the teeth. So like I said earlier, you don't want to overdo it and just have a bunch of grease thrown in your reel. That will cause dirt buildup and everything like that. But you want to make sure that they've got enough grease on them and they're good to go. So we're done on the inside of this thing. The only thing is we're going to put our springs back on there, and I also like to put a couple dabs of oil on the moving parts for this thumb bar. Just a couple dabs in there where that thumb bar moves up and down, and you should be good to go. Now I'm ready to put this side plate back on. When I put this side plate back on, I'm gonna put a dab or two of oil there and a dab or two around this roller bearing. Slide that back on. Should fit perfectly snug. Put another dab on the top side of this bearing, and now's when you're gonna put your screws back in. This one's got the little trap door for the adding grease. I've done that a few times where I've added grease, but for the most part, I'll take the reel all the way apart because I like to wipe that old grease out. I feel like if you leave that in there and you leave all the dirt in there, then it kind of defeats the purpose of just adding grease. And then we'll go to putting this this piece here in, and you want to make sure, so this piece will actually be, all the way around here, and then it'll have two little grooves here, and that portion there is the part that goes down in this assembly. So I'll put those down. I'll put the rest of the washers on that we took off earlier, tiny washers, and then these two that I was talking about where you need to make sure that it is got a little gap in there, and that you have the washers facing opposite directions so they're not like laying flat on each other. Stick this last one on there that actually catches the drag, and then I can actually put my star washer on there, my star drag. Thread that back on, and you kind of have, sometimes it'll rotate itself. So if you hold this, or sometimes if you get all the way done, sometimes I'll even put my handle back on in order to tighten the drag, but just kind of play it by ear. But like once you get it so somewhat tight, then it'll just move on its own. So I got my drag tightened down. I put a drop of oil in there already. So then I'm ready to add my spool tensioner, and you want to be careful with this to make sure it's on there perfectly level. You don't want to cross thread it or anything. So I got that on there. And I actually don't tighten this down all the way right away, because you'll see when you put your actual spool in, sometimes it won't go in all the way if you have that tightened in all the way. I'll finish putting my my handle on. There's actually a washer on this one. There's a washer between the handle and the star, and then there's another washer that sits right in there. And then I'll put this nut on. As you can see, I've kind of worn down this nut by taking it on and off for cleaning, but still the reel just lasts so much longer when you do these cleanings. This guy's actually meant for tightening, so you it's kind of its own little pliers or whatever, and you'll push that over like that. It's locked into place. You'll put the screw in to hold it into place, and this one's kind of tricky because it's a little bitty screw. So I'll tighten that up. And it's time to start putting the spool back in. I'll wipe this spindle down, and you'll see there's a bearing here. And then I'll also put a drop on the end of this. So I'll put a drop there, and I'll put a drop or two on there. Put it in with the long side in first. You see there it went all the way in, but if I would have had this thing tightened all the way down, it might not have quite gone all the way in. You have issues. So then, same with the other side of the thumb bar. I'll add a drop on this thumb bar right here, and also on this tip of the spool too. So now we're ready to put the side plate on, and then we're done. But I'll put another drop, since it's a bearing, a drop or two on that. Stick that on there. It slides right into place. I'll push that bar back down. And that reel is ready to go for the year. It's a lot better as far as smoothness, and we got all that dirt out of there, so it's going to cast a lot farther, and everything is just perfect. And the last thing that I'll do is I'll actually put a drop or two on these little moving parts. So like you'll see where this moves back and forth on this bar, I'll put a drop there. Inside here where this worm gear is, I'll put some oil on there, and that'll just really help out a bunch. We got all the reel cleaned off, and it's ready to go, ready to put on a reel, and ready to get back to the water. Hopefully this tip helped you guys out. Hopefully it makes your reels last a lot longer. I know it has with mine. And I put these things through a lot. And just something I do every winter. Gives me a reason to get out in the garage and work on tackle and work on reels, and make sure everything is ready to go for the upcoming fishing season. Hopefully you guys enjoyed these tips and tricks, and be sure to follow along for more, and we'll see you guys next time.